Welcome to Elemental Technologies. I really want to thank everyone for coming today and showing the civic interest and civic engagement in your community. We've got a great debate between Jefferson Smith and Charlie Hales, two fantastic candidates for mayor here in Portland. My name is Sam Blackman, CEO and co-founder of Elemental. I want to say a quick couple of things about Elemental. We build video processing software that takes video that was designed to be transferred over legacy networks, over the air or over cable networks, and we make it so it can be viewed on mobile devices like iPads, iPhones, set-top boxes, connected game stations, that sort of thing. And so this is a kind of a good example of our technology that you can see this debate on any type of device if you log into the URL. Our moderator today is Mr. Roy Kaufmann. Roy has been in the city of Portland for quite some time. He's not a native Oregonian, but he's a naturalized Oregonian, as he told me, which was the first time I'd heard that term. Very, very good one. Formerly worked for the mayor, Sam Adams, for several years, and before that did a lot of work in public policy, foreign affairs, defense, and other organizations. So, Roy, thank you so much for your time. Everyone has a little card in front of them. We really want this to be interactive, so please take the time to ask questions if some of them come to mind during the debate, and pass them up front. You can also tweet them if you don't like writing by hand. I know these days writing by hand is out, so tweeting works well, and the hashtag is #PDXMayor. Great. All right, without further ado, Mr. Roy Kaufmann.
Make sure I got this. I think the sound guy would be disappointed. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to Sam, to Elemental for hosting this, to Technology Association of Oregon, formerly Software Association of Oregon, for their leadership on this issue and with today's forum. Very excited to have the opportunity to ask these two candidates some tough questions about software, about entrepreneurship, business, and then maybe some other more general questions. Like Sam said, please be engaged, ask questions, hold up your note cards. I will also come by at about 15 minutes past to collect questions. And again, the #PDXMayor hashtag for Twitter questions. There are people watching this from all over the nation, including my parents in San Diego. So hello, parents in San Diego. It's a very proud moment for me. So a couple of ground rules just to help keep moving things along. Each of the candidates is going to have 1 minute to give an opening statement, an introduction. They will have 1 minute to answer each question. If an answer requires or feels like it requires a rebuttal or a response, and that will be at my discretion, they'll have 30 seconds for that rebuttal. If somebody answers a question and we feel that it is not an actual answer to the question, then I will give them a chance to answer it again, but they will have 45 seconds to do it in. And lastly, if you go over a minute, candidates, you have a 10-second grace period, and then I will start counting the seconds you are over and taking it off the following answer to your question. That may seem a little harsh, but we want to keep things moving. So with that said, let's bring up our candidates. We have Representative Jefferson Smith and former Commissioner Charlie Hales. Thank you, and let's welcome them, please. All right, so I believe we talked beforehand, and Commissioner Smith was going to go first on the opening statement. Is that accurate?
My last name is accurate. My title is not, but we'll get that covered.
Oh. All right, let's try this again. Shut the video
We're live
off.
streaming. Nobody caught it.
Nobody can see this. All right. Commissioner Hales was going to go first on the opening statement. Is that right?
No, I'll go first.
You'll go first.
And I'm Representative Smith, and he's former Commissioner
I'm
Hales.
familiar with you and your name.
Roy. Thanks for coming. All right, let's do this.
That's the first bro hug, but maybe not the last. We'll see. We'll see. All right, well, why don't we go ahead, Representative Smith, with your opening statement.
All right. I'm Jefferson Smith. I'm running for mayor. Thanks for having me. I'm running because this is my hometown, and I want to make it better. If I were in your chairs, I would be thinking about this election in terms of leadership, values, and the future. As for leadership, I've started and run a successful nonprofit. I have recent and current electoral experience dealing with budgets in tough times. Was honored to be named the 2011 Small Business Champion by Omen and the 2012 Political Web Visionary, which, if not an oxymoron, is admittedly a low bar. In terms of values, this is my hometown. This city has helped shape me. I've lived and gone to school elsewhere, but I'm a Portlander and would be the first mayor in the history of this city to be elected east of 82nd Avenue. One of the things I want to bring to this conversation, which I hope will be in our tech future, will be discussions about equity. I've been fiscally responsible in my legislative campaign, my legislative work, my mayoral campaign, and focused on the future. As for the future, I appreciate the chance to be here today and talk about it. In particular, we will be talking about basic services. I want to be engaging this community more deeply in our government and in our political process. It is my thought that addressing basic challenges in the 21st century resource-constrained environment will require more than basic thinking, and you can help. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioner Hales?
Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here and for being everywhere among those that are listening and participating in this discussion. We need to focus in this community on growing and keeping jobs. And I want to talk about 3 areas where, as your mayor, I hope, and as a leader in this community, I can help. First is education. One of the primary reasons I ran for this office in the first place is that we've held public education together with duct tape and bake sales in this community too long. And we must be able to give parents, prospective employees, and all of you the assurance that there will be a great public school system. And then that needs to be well connected to workforce training so that we have the capacity to grow with our own people. Second is something I've worked on for years, and that's quality of place. It's what brought a lot of us here. It's what we have in our brand. It's what we have in our souls. This is the best place. And I've had a lot to do, whether it's light rail or tree planting or building a better park system, in greening and improving the quality of place. And that's something that we still have a lot of work to do, particularly in the neighborhoods that were added to the city and don't have those blessings of a Portland neighborhood yet. And third, active partnerships. You know, at the office of mayor, you don't just make the speech, take the vote, and go home. You have to work in all kinds of partnerships in order to make things happen. There were 5 partners to Airport Light Rail, but we got it done 10 years ahead of schedule. So I'll bring that understanding and 10 years of successful private sector leadership, helping to grow a progressive business from 2,700 to 8,000 employees, to be your partner in a better future for Portland. Thank you.
All right, thank you to both of you. The first question is going to speak to your geek bona fides. This is a focus on entrepreneurship, software, and technology. So in the spirit of fairness, I'll say that from age 12 to 16, I played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I'm very proud of that fact. But that's why I have this +3 moderating ability. So thank you. In the spirit of the adage, the geek shall inherit the earth, what are your geek credentials, and more importantly, how do you think they'll help you be an effective mayor?
I will start with, who's first?
Go ahead, Jefferson.
I will start with my +4 Vorpal sword. Going backwards, I will not pretend to be a tech expert. I will pretend occasionally to play one on television and speak the language a little bit. In terms of going back further, I too played Dungeons and Dragons. My brother and I, sit on the side of the, what is it called? The Rose Festival Parade, playing also games like Champions, if people remember that. We had an Atari 2600 back in the day. We kept relatively current. Rather than going back into my dork past and visiting the various stores that have cropped up selling the kinds of things that I was addicted to before I cured, in legislative experience, helped pass state budget transparency to put the state budget online. Helped pass online voter registration. 150,000 Oregonians have registered to vote or changed their information there since we did that. Passed the Oregon Broadband Council Act that got us started mapping where the broadband dead spots are in our state and how we might fill them going forward. I think in terms of infrastructure investments, one thing that we need to be thinking about is not just in terms of coal trains coming through the city, liquefied natural gas, a Columbia River crossing we can't afford, and a casino, but thinking about broadband deployment, retrofitting public buildings, thinking about a smarter grid, infrastructure for the 21st century that is worthy of this city, and I will bring that ethic to the mayor's office.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Commissioner Hales.
Well, my geek bona fides go back to when I was a college student, and some of you may regard this as an error of judgment, but I decided to share a rental house with 4 electrical engineers. And so their idea of a good time on a weekend was to, believe it or not, go to the local dump where an electronics firm sent their equipment, and they had an understanding, I think money changed hands, with the truck driver that they got to salvage the equipment and take it back to our house and build stuff. And so even though I do not have an electrical engineering degree, I absorbed that sense of tinkering and innovation and of how things work. And I'm a fix-it guy, so I think part of that ethic was taught by my roommates. More specifically to the city, in 1998 we passed, we had a fight with AT&T over open access, which I think ultimately led to, after a couple of court cases and brawls, to Portland being a leader in open access and open source. And I'm proud of that legacy. And going forward, here's a specific example where my geekdom will come to bear. My friends in Salt Lake City have an entirely paperless building permit process. Ours is nowhere near that, but it will be.
Thank you, both of you. Next question. Some of the best sports coaches in history have never played their game professionally. On the other hand, there's the saying, those who can do, and those who can't do, teach. How important is private sector leadership experience in being mayor if a key focus of yours is helping the private sector to flourish? We'll go with Commissioner Hales first.
I think it is important. I've spent the last 10 years helping grow a very progressive employee-owned planning and engineering firm called HDR. As I mentioned, we were about 2,700 people when I joined. We're about 8,000 people now. I can't claim all that success myself, just like none of you can individually for the growth of your companies. But that experience of powering through this recession by being smart, by using technology, by designing projects in one place with people working on them from all over the country, by working with our clients in a smarter and smarter environment, I learned a lot. And in the private sector, you also practice a kind of team leadership that's different than being an autocrat. You know, you have to be able to be an effective member of the team. Sometimes on a project, you might be my boss. On the next project, it might be the other way around. And actually, in Portland's weird form of government, in which the mayor is one member of 5 who all have the same vote, and it takes 3 votes to do anything, that capacity to be a good team member, to listen, to deliberate, is important.
Thank you. Representative Smith?
I'm a politician. And that is something that most politicians don't like to acknowledge. In fact, very often the most popular thing to say is, screw politicians, vote for me. I think private sector leadership experience can be helpful. I think one of the things I do bring to this office is, in this race, is starting and running an organization for 10 years and learning what it meant to meet a payroll and have to lead a staff and help set objectives. Private sector chief executive experience or middle management experience is not a terrific indicator, however, in success in elected office. In fact, at the high levels, occasionally it has been an inverse indicator. And I don't know entirely why that is. But it might be because the levers in government that we have are less to hire and fire, promote or demote, or give a year-end bonus or a court-martial, but instead to work with soft power and work within a political context. I'm a politician, and that's one of the reasons I should be your mayor.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll start with Representative Smith on the answer. There's a debate raging nationally about whether a 4-year degree is necessary for a person to succeed in life, especially in the context of mounting student debts and a weak job market. Similarly, there is renewed awareness of vocational education and alternative post-secondary schooling. Do you believe that Portland needs to invest more heavily in alternatives to 4-year colleges, and do you believe that vocational or technical training can prepare students for the kind of jobs we want them to fill, especially in the software sector?
Yes.
All right, next. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Do you want me to say more?
If you'd like to.
I'll say more. The answer to the question is yes. I'll say a little more since I have 45 seconds. The couple ways we can do that. Benson High School offerings could be expanded, added into the evening so that weren't just for kids, but also for expanded job training and retraining opportunities. ACE Academy, which is out closer to my neck of the woods, which is a public-private partnership that helps you learn how to operate a front loader without having to operate a front loader, because they've got like a video game. And the first 10 times you operate a front loader, it's better to be using the video game. We could be expanding those offerings. To amplify the importance of the question, I do fear that higher education in this country is an economic bubble. Right? When I was in my law school tuition was about 25 grand. Now it's nearly 50 grand. The year I was born, a year at my law school was the same price as a trip on an airplane across the Atlantic Ocean. This is not sustainable. I don't know that the only answer is technical education, but it's got to be part of the answer.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner?
Yeah, also, yes. This is a consequence of a couple of things. One is this anemic funding system patched together ever since Measure 5, in which the legislature has not even held to their commitment to hold schools at 45% of the state budget. It's now down to 39, and that meant $30 million in loss to Portland Public Schools alone. So, and then the other pressure was the crazy No Child Left Behind, teach to the test ethic that now, fortunately, is in being pushed away. But the combination of those meant the school districts have cut way too much of this. So Benson's down to 800 students. There's a metal shop at Franklin that's scarcely used, and yet we have 50,000 manufacturing jobs in this city. This is not only important to the tech community, but it's important to people that make steel and bike parts and all those other tangible things that Portland still makes. So it's critical that we restore this capacity and give people a wide variety of choices for career that involves things like the Portland Workforce Alliance working with the schools to get them ready for those jobs.
Okay, thank you. This next question comes to us via Twitter from Jerry Cattell. The question is, gigabit broadband would give Portland an edge in tech and in education. How high is this a priority for each of you? And we'll start with Commissioner Hales this time.
Oh, I think it's a critical opportunity for us as a city to be on that cutting edge and stay there. The 2010-2020 broadband strategic plan that Brendan Finn and a lot of people and some people in this room have worked hard on is a great roadmap to get us there. We've got to look for those opportunities to leverage advancing into that world, whether it's the city's own policies for every time somebody digs a ditch or builds a project, that we get the conduits for the fiber in the streets. So I think Portland should be aggressive about this, look for every opportunity through our franchises and through what we do physically to transform the city to make us ready and then implement being that place that has that kind of broadband capability. Everyone's going to need it. It's also an equity issue. I was out at a mobile home park at 136th and Southeast Powell, and a lot of those seniors were saying, we're not sure if we can afford to still have internet service on our fixed incomes. So having an equity component of this as well as a capacity component is important.
Thank you. Representative Smith?
No, Jerry, I think it's an important question and an important priority. The one town I know of that has done it is Nashville. We've looked at what their results have been, have yet to get conclusive understanding of how positive it's been for them. The question for our town, if we want to, and the advantages could be significant, in particular getting people like in this room and over the interwebs, working with our film industry, could we have a stronger video game industry in our town? Right? It doesn't take a whole lot of industrial land to compete in an industry that is now dwarfing movies over time and probably will continue to do that. And might be, and this is potentially controversial to say it this way, but video games might be the art form of our generation, and our city could compete better in that realm. The question is how we do it. Where the debates are going to be, where the fights are going to be, is what role the public sector should play and with what money, and what role the private sector should play and with what regulatory burdens. And there's the stop sign. So with that, we have to figure that out together.
All right, thank you, both of you. This next question actually comes from somebody in the room, Naomi Derner. So thank you, and actually it's a question that I had as well. So we'll go with the same question, but I really was fond of my wording. So, but Naomi, you and I are on the same page on this one. So we've all heard, whether we wanted to or not, the phrase "put a bird on it," using that line as a potentially excruciating extended metaphor. Portland seems to be a great place for entrepreneurs to incubate their companies, but we seem to lose the little birdies once they get too big for the nest. I told you it was excruciating, Sam. I told you that. How are you going to keep those bigger companies here in our ecosystem and ensure they don't all migrate south? That's excruciating. Representative Smith, please.
It's so great.
Relationships and asking them to help and making our city work better and playing to our distinctive strengths. So first, understand that in 2010, we had 7 firms attracted $50 million in new venture capital, and all 7 kept their presence in Portland. I want to challenge a little bit the premise of the question. I think what might be happening with the evolution of our tech industry is not merely we incubate and send south, but we incubate, some will leave, some will stay, and it will mature, and we'll see what happens 5, 10 years from now. The others are play to our distinctive strengths, which include continuing to focus on livability. There will be those who come to you and say, hey, what we need to do primarily is reduce taxes on upper income earners, reduce spending, and make it easier to do things like, I don't know, a casino and moving coal through the city and the Columbia River crossing. But in fact, what that will do is make it harder to do anything about education, erode the livability importance, which was number 1 on the PDC software cluster rankings of why people in the tech industry liked Portland in the first place, so playing to our distinctive strengths. Also asking you to help. Not just what I can do to help the tech industry, but getting you invested in this community by me asking you to invest in the community.
Thank you. Commissioner Hales.
I don't know, Roy, could we hear Naomi's wording?
Yes.
No,
yes.
I'm teasing. I think access to capital is one piece of that. I like the seed fund. I think there are other opportunities for us to leverage that. In fact, if you didn't get a copy of it, both on my site and here in paper form are some ideas that I've put out today about these ideas, about these issues of access to capital, access to physical plant, because as businesses grow, Elemental's been through this. What is this, your 4th location now? This need for space that's affordable and also broadband served, is going to be critical. Our campaign office is over in the Central East Side. To me, that's this great incubator of smart, new, particularly film and video businesses. So the physical planning of the city, access to capital, those are a couple of things that we can do in addition to education, once again, being critical to try to keep this a place that's so good, people will find the means to stay here and grow here.
Okay, thank you. This next question comes to us from Lynn at the Portland Seed Fund. The question is, what will you do differently from the current mayor, Sam Adams, to support the software and digital media industry here in Portland? And we'll start with Commissioner Hales.
They asked Samuel Gompers, who was an early labor movement leader, what labor wants. And he said, more. And I think that's the answer here. I think what Sam and this administration have done are smart moves. I think the seed fund's a good idea. I think, as I mentioned, I think the broadband strategic plan is a good document. So I really have few quibbles with the policy direction that he's set on these issues. The question is, will there be enough capital in those funds? Will there be enough partnerships? Will there be space? Will there be more neighborhoods that are livable and have affordable houses that people can buy that work for these tech firms? So I think, again, there's a lot that's good going on in the city today. It's easy when you're running for office to always criticize, but I think Sam and his team have done a great job of being partners to this industry, and I want to do more.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Representative.
Would also give Sam pretty high marks, would hope to add a few things. One, in terms of our recruitment, very often what politicians are expected to do is tour around the countryside trying to recruit businesses. That can be a helpful exercise. What I hope also we will do together is go out to the countryside to recruit talent and capital. Because I have some sense from my friend Sam here, from other friends in the area who are running companies, how valuable the people who work in this community are and how we need more talent and we need more dough. Second, I think we can step up our interaction with sort of open government. That includes opening up city data and looking at what people in our community can do with it, and hosting hackathons to try to improve the technical offerings of our city. A single 311 telephone number for all non-emergency government phone calls, beginning with a website and an app that allows you to report like PDX Reporter does, but is more seamlessly integrated into the service delivery of the city and getting the firms and workers in our town helping us to solve those problems. A couple other things. We can do a better job with helping homegrown firms find access to new customers and new markets. And with the pink sign, I'll save that for another question.
All right, thank you. Next question. All right, this is a hypothetical situation. As mayor, you receive word that a company with questionable business and environmental practices is looking to locate a major facility in Portland, a facility that could potentially employ hundreds of people with family wage incomes. Whether you support the company's desire, you know that the issue will become public quickly. What position and what course of action do you take? We'll start with Resident Smith.
I understand the purpose of the question is to get a sense of our sort of ideological strategic underpinnings. Without the facts of the question, it's nearly impossible to give an answer that's anything more than political blather. That said, I'll say something. What I hope we will do is work with a company like that and see how we might mitigate the harm. What I hope we might do is, at the first instance, think about what a traction event that we could engage in that didn't have the same negative footprint. What we might try to do is see if we could locate a site that was the least harm. And what I hope we will do is, if all else fails, say, hey, there's other towns. We are going to have an economic development strategy based on our distinctive strengths. Because the last thing we want to do is erode the livability that is why we are having the growth in the tech sector that we have right now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hales.
You know, this isn't really that hypothetical, because these things actually happen all the time. I spent 10 years as a city commissioner, and my colleagues all developed the habit of always letting me make the motion on land use cases, which is a lot of what the city council actually does when it meets each week. So, for example, I made the motion to not allow Costco to build a new facility in the middle of the Northwest Industrial Sanctuary, because it's an industrial sanctuary. It was supposed to be there for real industrial employment. And that was a hard call, and it was very controversial. And the campaign for that project on the other side spent $1 million trying to lobby the city council. I also did the same thing with stopping gated entry development. This is typical in California. So there are times where we have to say, Portland is such a good place that we don't have to sell out. Of course we want to grow jobs here, but we do not have to sacrifice the quality of life, the plans we've made, or the urban growth boundary in order to grow this economy. Look at this business. We are growing within the urban growth boundary in a smart and sustainable way. We don't have to sell out, but there will be pressure to do that.
Thank you. This next question actually came to us from a number of online viewers. So we'll start with Commissioner Hales on the answer. The question is, what is your position on the proposed library district ballot measure?
I support it. It will cost the city some revenue because of the compression of property taxes. Another thing you can find on my website is a sleep-inducing paper about urban renewal. But we have 14.3% of the city in urban renewal districts. That means that the city is diverting about $100 million a year from schools, basic public services like parks in the city, libraries, and human services at the county into the Portland Development Commission. Now, obviously, we all know PDC does great things. One thing we can do, and that I will do, is start reducing that 14.3% and putting some of that value, like the Pearl District, back on the property tax rolls so that it pays for stuff like libraries. But in the meantime, it would be miserly and small-minded for the city of Portland to say, we've got ours, tough luck about your libraries. So I support the measure.
Thank you. Representative?
Also support it. Talked to Chair Jeff Kogan. Libraries are a county thing, but they're also impactful of the whole city. Right now, the city of Portland does the Multnomah County Library does 100,000 kids through summer reading. Los Angeles County has 700,000 kids, and they are very proud of their reading programs that serve, I think, 26,800 kids. We have perhaps the best summer reading program in the country. We need to build on it. I've, in talking to Chair Kogan, have said, listen, we might need to think about redivvying some of the division of responsibility between the city and county. We also should be thinking about how, in the same way, when there's an urban renewal proposal that potentially and generally does take some money out of the county rolls, and you probably weigh into that depending on the degree to which it helps accomplish common objectives, like an education district, for instance, which he eventually signed off on. In the same way, one of our key proposals is Portland Summers, trying to reduce the achievement gap that happens over the summers. And libraries are a critical partner with this. We will ask libraries to help alongside my support for the library district.
Thank you. This next question comes from our host, Sam Blackman. Actually from a staff member of Sam's, even better, Sam. Colleague. Mayors lead an agenda and staff implement it. How will you assemble your team to implement your agenda? We'll start with Representative Smith.
I have flaws, and I do some things badly. I make mistakes. One thing I have occasionally done very well is identify, recruit, and develop talent. If you look at the governor's office, multiple state legislators, advocates within organizations ranging from environmental groups, labor groups, the Oregon Business Council, you will find very talented people for whom I was patient 0 to patient 3 in their development. I think we have a chance to put together one of the best teams in the history of this city, certainly over the last 20, 25 years. To do that, I would take one page from former Mayor Hickenlooper of Denver, who engaged members of the community in the transition planning process to help identify the best and brightest, not only within government, but outside. And using that exercise to also inform some of the strategic planning and to make sure that people felt more invested and bought into the city. What I've also learned from trying to, and in fact, starting and building a staff and working in a minor role with the governor's transition team, is that the job of recruitment can't be left to a single person, but takes some version of a village, and I hope this village will help.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioner Hales.
Well, on a couple of levels here, you can see what I'll do by what I've done. When I was in city office before, I think if you talk to people who were involved, they'll tell you that both my own staff and the people I put in positions of responsibility as department heads were some of the best and most talented people in city government. I'm proud of that. And I cast a wide net when I look for people. But speaking of that, I've spent the last 10 years fighting and competing in an industry with a shrinking market where we were increasing our market share, and we did that by finding the best people. What we have to sell is the product of talent. We're designing buildings and nanotechnology laboratories and bridges and light rail systems. So that's what we do. That's what my company does. It's all about talent. It's all about finding and recruiting the best people. And I've done a lot of that for my company, and that's part of why we've grown and why we're now the national market leader in light rail and streetcar work around the country. I'm proud of that. So I'll bring that to this job as well. There's a lot of talent here locally, but we sometimes are a little parochial. I've had the chance to work in cities all over the country. There are a few people that I would like to see compete for these jobs from the national pool as well as locally.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of talk about the Portland brand and how it compares with other city brands around the nation and around the world. 2 questions. Can you describe the Portland brand in 5 words or fewer? And is the brand where it needs to be? We'll start with Commissioner Hales.
The Portland brand in 5 words or fewer. The best place, period. That's what it is to me. I mean, this is the best place. I came here by choice as a 23-year-old in an old car. Anybody represent that story? And we have all worked hard as a community to make it the best place. We have a park system that somebody had the vision to plan 112 years ago and say, buy that top of Mount Tabor, even though it was outside the city limits. So we've planned well. We've shown this capacity to build partnerships and do things. So we are the best place, both physically and socially. We're one of the last big American cities where 84% of eligible kids still go to public schools. We have so much that we have been bequeathed and that we've made better. So I think we're the best place. The other part of the question was, what can I do to make it better? I'm sorry.
Well, is the brand where it needs to be?
Is the brand where it needs to be? We need to make it real. There are parts of the city where that's not true, where there's not a paved street or a neighborhood park or a grocery store that you could walk to or find fresh food in or a farmer's market. So we need to make it real and have the reality in all parts of the community actually reflect the brand.
Thank you. Representative?
It's a great question. My answer isn't as great. I would use words like innovative and values and livable. Wonderful place, trendsetter. If wonderful place is 1 word, that's 5. What I would hope we would add to it is a dose of discipline and another dose of equity in seeing the whole picture. That in my school district, 80% of the kids are on free or reduced price lunch. The rooms that I go to in my district are not nearly as white as this one. that reflects, to a greater degree, the future of Portland than many Portlanders recognize. There are not many episodes of Portlandia filmed in my neighborhood. So I think we need to build upon the strengths of our brand, and without eroding those strengths, without saying, oh, we're not really that great, we don't really want to be weird, we don't want to be innovative, we don't want to be livable, we'd rather be something else, trying to add a couple of doses of discipline and equity to the strengths that we have.
Thank you. This next question comes from Greg of this company, Elemental Technologies. Thank you, Greg. The question is, what is your relationship with Portland State University or other higher education institutions in the city, and what can the mayor do to strengthen university engineering programs specifically? Mm-hmm. And we'll start with Representative Smith, please.
Could you repeat that one?
Yes, I will do my best. What is your relationship with PSU, Portland State University, and other higher education institutions in the city, and what could you as mayor do to strengthen those universities' engineering programs?
I don't know how to characterize the relationship. I know that my wife is a PSU graduate and have worked a little bit in the legislature interacting with higher education. What I think, as mayor, what I can do is help vision the future of higher education, which I think is different. We got a related question at one of our earlier forums, and somebody said, oh, the Boston, Massachusetts area has all these wonderful institutions. Do you see that as a vision for Portland? Because we have lots too that could get bigger. And my response was not really, because they have large-scale endowments that we are not likely to compete with anytime soon. We should grow them, but the University of Cincinnati right now has an endowment that dwarfs the PSU endowment, which means, yes, growing PSU, also thinking about what does 21st century higher education look like. That includes more online education. That includes more partnerships. That probably includes not just an expansion of PSU, but thinking about how the PSU area can be PSU plus U of O plus OSU plus maybe even a little Reed outpost, or maybe even somewhere like MIT, putting a little outpost there, and looking at what does a collaborative education center geographically, not just institutionally, look like. I think that's something that a mayor might be able to help with.
Thank you. Commissioner Hales.
This is really important. We don't have a single large research university like Seattle does, but we have this constellation of both public and private universities and colleges. And I have great relationships with Vim Vibel at Portland State, and Joe Robertson at OHSU and the other college presidents in town. But more importantly, I've helped those universities plan their own futures. Portland State's university district plan was something that I worked on when I was at the city before. We set the physical frame for their growth. The same thing's happening now with the University of Portland. They have this ambitious plan to expand down onto the waterfront, take the McCormick and Baxter Superfund site and turn it into soccer fields, get a trail through there, the new North Portland Greenway Trail. So the physical part of city government, a big part of the job, helping those universities create the frame, but also create the partnerships like the Collaborative Life Sciences Center that OHSU and PSU and the city are putting together in the South Waterfront. So programmatically, I'd like to see us create more of those partnerships on the engineering side. Again, I work for an engineering company. I understand the need for that kind of talent and the need to grow it here and to build those partnerships between the city, the private sector, and the universities to foster it and keep it here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, another question from the room, from John at the University of Portland. What is an example of an issue that your position is very different from the position of your opponent? We will start with Commissioner Hales.
I think probably the issue of guns is where we've disagreed the most sharply. Jefferson can explain his position, but I'm very proud to say I have a 0% record with the gun lobby, and that I'm very interested in strong gun laws here in Portland and statewide and nationally. There's no reason for anyone to own an assault weapon, and we have gang members all over the city of Portland with illegal guns right now. So this is an issue that I'm passionate about, that as a father and as a citizen and as somebody who has seen the carnage on our streets accelerate this year, we've got to be serious about guns and be willing to fight the fight against those that take an extreme view of the Second Amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative Smith.
I haven't seen in this race, except for as discussed by the other candidate for this office or the media, a policy proposal for guns in the city where we differ, whether that's assault weapons or illegal guns. And I also, actually I don't know if you have, Charlie, but I have signed on to the Mayor Bloomberg's Mayors Against Illegal Guns. A couple of differences I have seen. One, I have not promised to get the Columbia River crossing built in the first year of my administration, or rather, excuse me, started. I think in order to do so, starting between 5 months or 17 months, that would mean essentially doing the current plan. I don't think the current plan makes much sense at all, and I don't even think a shaved down version ever so slightly, calling it phased, but in fact it wouldn't be, makes that much sense either. I have not proposed that we eliminate systems development charges, the basic fees on developers when they're pushing in infill housing on things like water and sewer and streets and parks. I think it would be a mistake to give a two-year elimination of those things, and have felt like that from the beginning. I'm also the only candidate in this race who from the beginning supported the Office of Equity, because I recognize that our city is changing and isn't getting whiter. So I believe those are differences. They are at the very least differences in consistency of principle.
Since you brought up a number of different issues, Commissioner Hales, would you like the opportunity to respond? If so, you have 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah. And the Columbia River crossing, I've said the same thing from the beginning. You can look it up in the Willamette Week story back in June of last year. That's how long we've been running for this office. That project, I believe there's a version of it that fits our values that we can build and that we should start building soon and move out of planning and into construction. We spent $150 million planning that project. That's what we spent to build Airport Light Rail. It's time to get it moving forward, but that means a slimmed down, yes, version of the project that gets a main span over the river that doesn't have to lift for a barge, that gets light rail to Clark County, and doesn't have a $600 million interchange on Hayden Island. So there's a version of that project that makes sense, and I'll help make it happen.
Okay, thank you. So going back to something that both of you had referenced earlier, we frequently hear in the region the debate over urban renewal areas. I've read your position papers. So you're welcome. Without getting into
apologies, you're the one.
Without getting into the longer conversation on the angels and demons of urban renewal, frequently politicians will say that it is the single best or frequently only tool for urban development. What new tool would you invent or import from another city to encourage economic growth outside of the toolbox of urban development, urban renewal areas? We'll start with Commissioner Hales.
Good question. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about urban renewal, and we should keep doing that. But let's look ahead. There are some other cities that are doing some smart things. One is the use of land trusts. And there's a little bit of that here. The Proud Ground organization that's using land trusts to create very affordable home ownership opportunities. Pretty smart idea. We should use that more. My friend DJ Baxter, who runs the Salt Lake City Redevelopment Agency, operates in a very different kind of program than we do, and that is they go into blighted areas, truly blighted areas, another problem with our urban renewal, and they, like Pac-Man, anybody remember Pac-Man? Gobble up all the sites, aggregate them into something big enough to do something with, and then resell it. A very different program than what we're doing at PDC. So think about 82nd Avenue and how underbuilt 82nd Avenue. Imagine if that could be aggregated into large enough sites to really build something that would employ people. I like that idea, and I want to talk to DJ about that more for here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative Smith, same question.
So I want to say something with a bigger picture and then something specific. Because here's a place where I think we need one another's help. It'll take me a 3-sentence description of the last 100 years of American politics. I apologize, but bear with me for 3 sentences. First 50, 60 years of the last century, mostly liberals building infrastructure, including social justice infrastructure, largely around raising marginal tax rates. And it was the New Deal and the Great Society, the Interstate Highway Act, the Progressive Era. That game started getting harder to play, in part because it had been done a bunch of times, and in part because of the growth of a movement calling into question the entire enterprise. Over the next 40, 50 years, politicians have still wanted to do stuff, so they or we have done stuff with tax breaks. And right now, debt load on urban renewal is what, 25% of property tax here? And in the state of Oregon, we are spending more on tax breaks than on education, healthcare, and public safety combined. The next era of government that the Tea Party has their way is to destroy it. If James Fallows of Atlantic Monthly has his way, it's muddled through. If we do a little bit of both of those, we should also be thinking ways to make revenue. I won't have time to talk about Littleton, Colorado, and what we can do within PDC to give homegrown firms access to advanced business intelligence, market research, things like Indo Windows. But if he wants to ask me a follow-up, I'll answer.
I'll think about it, but thank you for the setup. This next question focused again on the priority sectors, priority industries identified by PDC, or Portland Development Commission. This is a question about the Portland Seed Fund. Currently, the city puts in about $500,000 a year to this brand new program that invests seed stage capital into startup companies. The question specifically is, do you believe it is worthwhile to continue to invest at that level, or given the ROI, the return on investment in those kinds of investments, is that work best left to private capital? We'll start with Commissioner Hales.
I think more support from the city is appropriate. It's working, and it should be part of our economic development program. But let me back up for a little bit, because if you talk about spending more money, you ought to be able to explain where it comes from. There are two things that the city needs to do differently in how we manage ourselves before we can get to that. I don't mean this is going to take a long time. It's going to be how we do the budget in the first few months of my administration, if I have an administration. One is that we need to change the shape of city administration, which is now 6 workers for every manager or overhead position. The auditors pointed that out. It should be 10 or 12 to 1. That's how we find more money in the city budget. It's focusing more dollars at the program level, whether that's teaching kids how to swim, or mowing grass in the parks, or firefighters or police officers, or economic development. Second thing that has to happen, and I want to lead this discussion in the community, a lot of people have a stake in this, is what's PDC's mission in the future? Not just real estate development, but also economic development. What do we do locally versus regionally through things like Greater Portland, Inc.? So we need to have that strategic discussion about where's PDC going, what's its economic program, and how does the seed fund fit into it. I think it does. I think it should be bigger, but first we have to get the foundation laid.
Thank you. Representative Smith.
So my hope is that the next stage of the seed fund will potentially be bigger, not smaller, and will potentially look at what equity role either the seed fund or partners can be taking. I also want to add the conversation that the state is having with the new Oregon Investment Authority and figuring out what that's going to look like. Is that going to look like more chances for sort of a carry-on of what I was saying in the answer to the next question? How can government raise revenue without, or at least beyond, raising taxes and tax breaks? And I think that looking for chances like the seed fund are exactly the kind of things that we should be looking at. I want to say something about Greater Portland, Inc. And again, a little call to service to the people in this room. They have 31, maybe it's 32 board members. I think only one of them is from an innovation sector company. Right? There hasn't been nearly enough, not nearly enough. Sam excluded, and some of the people in this room excluded. There hasn't been nearly enough engagement from the tech sector within the policymaking sphere. Not only to figure out what the policymaking sphere can do to help your company, but to figure out how we can all be in this together to make government work better. So anyway, Pink.
Pink, thank you. Well, you mentioned innovation, and that actually keys to the next question. And I'll combine a couple of questions in the interest of time. And just for housekeeping purposes, we have about 10 minutes left. So if you have questions that you have not yet turned in or tweeted in, please do so. This next question, how would you leverage local innovations and the local DIY, do-it-yourself movement to make the city run more efficiently and to benefit the growth of small companies? Yes, we'll start with Representative Smith.
Let's talk about Boston, Massachusetts, and fire hydrants. So I know it's popular to do ads about basic services, filling potholes, storm drains, etc. In Boston, Massachusetts, they had a problem with fire hydrants getting covered in snow, which matters. You arrive on the scene to put out a fire, spend a minute and a half clearing out snow. What they did, instead of buying a bunch more trucks and driving around the city, is they developed an app that allowed people to adopt their own fire hydrant and clean it and name it. And as long as they kept it clean, they could keep it named. But if they didn't clean it, their neighbor could steal it. And it went viral, and people adopted fire hydrants across the city. Honolulu, Hawaii did the same thing with tsunami warning sirens, getting covered in brush. They don't have snow. Or their app cured the snow. We could do the same thing with storm drains. We can be doing more to put the government in the palms of people's hands, recognizing there is a limit to what 5,000 city employees can do. There are far fewer limits to what 580,000 residents of Portland can do.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioner Hales.
Oh, I think this is one of these cases where if we're smart in city government, we'll foster a lot of conversations with the people in this room. Because first of all, we need advice and collaboration about how the city does its work. I mentioned the building permit process. There are some tools out there that we can use. But right now, it's a classic case of how the city is behind the curve. Multiple bureaus doing different things, and in some cases using very old tools like microfiche. I'm not making this up. Whereas Salt Lake City's system is fully paperless and in real time for everybody involved, whether you're a neighborhood activist or an applicant or somebody in the bureaucracy. Speaking of neighborhoods, that's one place where I think we should really look at using technology differently. You know, Portland has this national success story of a neighborhood association system, but it has traditionally been the 25 people who are willing to show up in a church basement on a Thursday night. That's not most of us, and that's less of us over time. So using technology, both apps and the knowledge that we bring to that discussion to refresh that system is something I'm very excited about, and I look forward to hearing a lot of ideas to do it.
Thank you. This next question looks at the issue of innovation and sustainability. You cannot swing a compost pail around without hitting somebody talking about sustainability. I have tried. And most of that innovation and sustainability is driven by the private sector. But what happens is we quickly get leapfrogged by larger cities with more capital and get surpassed in those innovation advancements, green building being just one of those. What will you do as mayor to ensure that Portland's private sector innovators in sustainability don't get left behind by other cities? We'll start with Commissioner Hales.
Well, I think the Portland Development Commission was right, and Mayor Adams, again, I want to praise that work, to call out clean tech and sustainability as one of our clusters that we're focusing on. I think they missed one, by the way, which is food. You know, we have the urban growth boundary, we have real agriculture, we're Munich on the Willamette in terms of beer. You know, we should also have a cluster around food in addition to the ones that they identified. But the sustainability, green tech, planning capability that we have here, my company and a lot of others export a lot of planning talent. I mean, we do the work here and sell it to people outside of Portland. So I think that's a very promising area. I think, again, PDC has to focus in what it does in economic development. I think focusing on our sustainable brand, on the reality that we figured this stuff out 20 years before a lot of other cities did, whether it's streetcars or green roofs, and sell that to the world, not just Portland. My wife runs a program at PSU that deals with delegations that come here. She's had a whole parade of delegations from China looking for the technology for green roofs. Let's sell it to them.
Thank you. Representative Smith.
I agree with you on that food cluster thing. I know I'm supposed to compliment you, but that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Smart guy.
We all like to eat.
I know. So one thing to do is hopefully do a better job of making the cost savings case. So I think the downfall of, well, I think it's probably the downfall of the Sustainability Center was it didn't make the case of its didn't make its costs case in the current cost environment. I think if we move to a little bit greater focus on building retrofits, we could make that cost case a little bit better and show how, and because such a large percentage of the building space over the next 50 years has already been built, I think being best of breed in building retrofits around energy efficiency and seismic safety would be a really great thing to become best of breed in. More than that is helping homegrown businesses find new customers and new markets. I'll give just one example. and we could do this through PDC, the PSU Accelerator, or through the Portland-Vancouver Regional Partners or Greater Portland, Inc. Indo Windows makes a removable window insert. Gives you about 95% of the energy savings of a double pane window at about 15% the price point. What they don't have access to is GIS mapping and weather pattern information to figure out where to deploy their small sales force. And they don't have 200 grand to buy it. But working with other firms and maybe PSU, they could get access to that and help grow from a 14-member firm to maybe 28 and higher member firm and hopefully grow that company here.
Thank you, Representative. We have just a couple minutes left, so I'll try and get a couple more questions in. Since you both talk a great deal about the incredible challenges facing East Portland, I'm curious as to whether you also both listen to what's being said by your opponent. Can you name one of your opponent's ideas for revitalizing East Portland, and do you agree or disagree with it? And Representative Smith, we'll start with you.
Good question. No, I can do it. I can do it. Yes, and as much as possible, if we could, particularly in Portland, when we're not, like, Charlie and I disagree on some stuff, but he's not Paul Ryan, right? I mean, he and I agree on a lot of things.
Crucifix and garlic.
So I hope we won't always refer to each other as opponents. We're both running for the same office, but Charlie Hales isn't the problem. We've got lots of problems, and he's not in the top 50.
I think I've been damned with faint praise.
No, it might be part of the solution, and I think it's part of the solution.
Problem 51.
Charlie has shown a commitment throughout his career to parks, and in East Portland, having better access to parks will be a critical thing. If you look at our country from space, you can predict affluent areas and poorer areas by looking how green they are or not. And I think that is at least one place where I think Charlie has shown leadership around the city and his background, and would hope to work with him in the future on that.
Thank you, Representative. Commissioner Hales?
Yeah, Jefferson has pointed out the real challenges that are faced by a David Douglas school district. You know, we have multiple school districts within the city of Portland, and the mayor needs to be a partner for all of them. And you've been pointing out, and you're right, that the challenge they face in terms of 80% free and reduced lunch, that's the percentage. 80% of the kids are eligible for free and reduced lunch, and I think 76 languages spoken in the high school. And I think he's been right to point out that we need to be equitable, and that doesn't just mean giving every neighborhood the same thing. It means that we have particular challenges in East Portland, in education, in miles of unpaved streets, in missing parks that hopefully one of us can get the next bond measure passed and add to the system. So you've been very clear about the education issue in particular, and I think you're right.
Thank you. This will be the last question, unfortunately. In 100 years, when freshmen at PSU are taking an early 21st century Portland political history course, what words would you like the professor to use when he explains your administration? We'll start with Commissioner Hales.
Oh, I think I want the professor to talk about how we finally rounded the corner on education funding and stopped holding it together with that duct tape and bake sales, and either passed a statewide sales tax or otherwise put schools on a firm foundation for the future. I want the professor to talk about how we've accomplished high-speed rail from Eugene to Seattle without the federal government, because even with the second Obama administration, they didn't have enough money to help us finish that job, but we figured out how to do it with local money. And then I'd like to see the side note about Forest Park being not just 5,000 acres, but being truly a sustainable ecosystem with the ivy removed and the Balch Creek restored, and the kind of place that the Olmsteds 100 years ago envisioned it would be for us. So again, I think the best place, period, has to be realized with very specific projects like better schools, better transit, and better parks. And I hope they'd say, yeah, he said that and he did it.
Thank you. Representative Smith.
My favorite story about Portland, Oregon is Waterfront Park, which is supposed to be a freeway, but is a park. And the reason wasn't merely because some benevolent politician, but because of people of our city who decided, how about not that? Including a woman named Allison Belcher who held picnics and ladies' teas on the side of that road, included a sign that said, imagine if this were a park, and now it's a park. 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now, I hope they talk about the next 4, 8, or whatever number of years as a revitalization of the civic essence of our town. And I hope the stories that they tell are less about me, but I hope they tell stories about people like Sam Blackman, who helped Elemental become job spin-offers and innovative spin-offers that Tektronix was some years ago. I hope they tell stories about Linda Robinson, who's an East Portland resident, who is working to build the Gateway Green and create a green sanctuary in a place that is far too strip mall and strip club heavy. I hope they tell stories about people who were working to help our city embrace growing diversity. And I hope that they look at Portland and recognize it as a place that sets an example to the nation of what a place can be like, not merely because of a commitment to sustainability or to economy or prosperity or equity, but because of a commitment to democracy.
Thank you, Representative. Well, that is all the time we have for today's discussion. I want to thank all the viewers, everybody who came out today. I want to thank our host, Sam Blackman, Elemental Technologies. I want to thank our candidates. This is a reminder, the last day to register to vote, I believe, is October 16th. Ballots are due November 6th. This is a vote-by-mail state, so if you've just recently moved to Oregon, it is a vote-by-mail state, but your friends can help you figure it out. It's actually quite easy. Election Day, November 6th. Learn more, register to vote, vote, and thank you everyone for coming out today.
Thank you. Good job. Nicely done. Another hug.
Now I got two. I have to bookend it.